Welcome to a new deep dive from the Pop Research Robot.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, we're really glad you're here with us. This deep dive, it's designed specifically for you, the curious learner who needs to get up to speed quickly on some really critical urban issues.
Absolutely. And today we're tackling something huge but often overlooked, the work of care.
It really is massive. We've essentially distilled two key sources for you. One is a scholarly article looking deep into Bogotá's pioneering care system, and the other is a broader framework for creating what they call caring cities.
And we're focusing on the shared insights, the common threads between these two really powerful pieces.
Exactly. So the first one, the academic article, is Care as Urban Policy Domain, Framing Bogotá's District Care System. The authors are Catalina Ortiz from University College London and Isabel Duque Franco from Universidad Nacional de Colombia. Incredible work there.
Really deep analysis, and we're pairing that with a more practical global guide. It's called She Rises, a framework for caring cities.
Right, and that comes from the social enterprise SafeTipin. The research team includes Suravi Tanan Mehrotra, Kalpana Viswanath, Ankita Kapoor, and Riti Mandal. A lot of great minds involved.
So what ties these together? What's the big idea we're exploring today?
Well, the core argument, and it's pretty transformative, is that care, all that unpaid work that keeps households and communities going, isn't just a private family matter anymore.
Right. It's emerging as a really essential area of public policy for cities.
Absolutely essential. And embracing that requires, a complete rethink of institutions and even the physical layout of our cities. It's a huge shift.
It really is. Our mission today is to unpack what that shift looks like and what it means for you.
Before we jump in, just a quick note. This deep dive is produced by the Shared Use Mobility Center and the Global Network for Popular Transportation.
That's right. We are the Pop Research Robot, and this deep dive was produced with the help of AI, specifically Notebook LM. But importantly, there was human oversight and management throughout the entire process.
Okay, let's get started.
Okay, so this huge shift, taking care work from being, invisible and just expected, to something City Hall actually has to manage. Why now? And what does it even mean to call care an urban policy domain?
Well, the sources are pretty clear that this has been building for a long time, decades really. But the COVID-19 pandemic was like the catalyst, the great accelerator.
It really exposed a lot of cracks, didn't it?
It absolutely did. Both documents talk about how care work, what feminist scholars call reproductive labor, has historically been invisibilized. It's all the essential stuff needed to sustain daily life.
Cooking, cleaning, childcare, elder care, emotional support, just managing everything.
Exactly. It's the foundation, right? The bedrock that allows the whole formal economy to even function. But it was treated as if it just happened magically at no cost.
And mostly done by women in homes.
Disproportionately, yes.
Yeah.
Confined to the private sphere. Then the pandemic hits and doesn't just strain things. It exposes what the authors call a multi-dimensional crisis of care.
Yeah.
It just laid bare how unequally that essential reproductive labor is distributed.
Across different social classes, different parts of the city.
Right. So you asked what it means to call it an urban policy domain. This is the key conceptual jump.
Okay.
A policy domain is basically the recognized space where the city decides, okay, this is a public problem we need to deal with. It determines which institutions get to act, where the money goes.
So like transport or economic development or policing, those are traditional domains.
Exactly. And they're mostly focused on, productive output, making money, moving goods, efficiency.
Right.
But by saying care is also an urban policy domain, the city is now, legally and financially obligated to take on new responsibilities. The state has to rethink its structures, its budgets.
So it's not just about boosting the economy anymore.
It's about actively sustaining people, social reproduction, shifting priorities from just commerce to, human well-being.
Put simply, it means the city starts prioritizing people's well-being over just maximizing profits.
That's the fundamental shift. And it's not just administrative shuffle, it's deeply political. It comes from feminist thinking that sees care not just as tasks, but as a political principle.
A principle that challenges the old ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It challenges those traditional urban logics, efficiency above all, maybe patriarchal ways of governing, and says, no, we need to focus on interdependence, on sustaining life.
And there's a framework often used globally to think about this, right? The 3 Rs.
Yes, the 3 Rs framework is really influential. Stands for recognize, reduce, and redistribute unpaid care work.
Okay, break those down.
So recognize is about acknowledging that this work has real economic and social value. It's not free. It's not just women's work.
Got it.
Reduce is about lessening the actual burden, the physical work, the mental load, through things like better infrastructure, accessible services.
Makes sense.
And redistribute is the big one. It's about shifting the responsibility. It shouldn't just fall on individual households, especially women. The state, communities, even the market need to share that load.
And the She Rises framework we mentioned that builds on this.
It does, yeah. It takes these ideas and expands them into a concrete plan for cities.
What's also interesting is where this innovation is coming from. The sources point to Latin America.
That's a really crucial point. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Latin America has been a hotbed for feminist theory and, importantly, policy action around care for a long time.
So Bogota isn't just an isolated case.
Not at all. It's a key example, a kind of beacon for the rest of the world, precisely because it grew out of decades of feminist activism in the region that successfully pushed these ideas onto the government's agenda.
Okay, so the big takeaway here is the pandemic revealed a crisis, forcing cities to see care work as essential. And the solution involves the government stepping up, taking responsibility, and redesigning infrastructure to support people, not just profit.
That's the core idea. The state's job becomes building and maintaining infrastructures of care. So if we accept care as this vital political principle, the next question is, why do our current cities fail so badly at supporting it?
Right, and both sources seem to agree. The problem is baked into how cities are designed. They're fundamentally unequal.
Exactly. It's a really powerful critique of what they call masculinized planning. Our cities aren't neutral backgrounds. They were largely designed by men for a very specific male-centric lifestyle.
Prioritizing certain things over others.
Definitely. Traditional planning focused on these masculinized norms. Think about, huge highways slicing through neighborhoods, giant industrial parks on the edge of town. The whole model is based on linear commuting.
The idea of the typically male worker going from home straight to one job and straight back.
Precisely. One long trip, usually by car or maybe public transit, designed for that peak hour rush. It centers the formal economy, the productive functions, and basically ignores everything else.
And that everything else is often the care work, the reproductive tasks needed to keep life going.
Exactly. That work gets marginalized by the physical design of the city. And the result is that women, who still do the vast majority of this unpaid care work, experience the city in a totally different way than men.
Their ability to even participate fully is limited.
Severely limited. The She Rises framework really spells this out. A woman's right to the city, her ability to access everything the city offers, is constrained by things like inadequate services being too far away, the sheer logistical challenge of juggling tasks, and, critically, the pervasive fear of gender-based violence and harassment.
If the city feels inconvenient and unsafe, you just can't participate fully.
You can't. And this leads us straight to the mechanism behind the care burden. Time poverty caused by trip chaining. This is so crucial to understand.
Okay, trip chaining. Paint a picture for us. What does that look like?
Well, think about that linear commuter, maybe like a bullet train, point A to point B.
Yeah.
The caregiver, though, is more like a local bus making 20 stops. Because care work is disproportionately done by women, their travel isn't linear at all. It's complex. They're trip chaining.
Making multiple short trips all day long.
Yes. It's not just home to work. It's home to the daycare, then maybe the market, then swing by the pharmacy for an elderly parent, then pick up the kids from school, maybe try to fit in a part-time job somewhere.
Wow, okay. And then do it all again in reverse?
Right. And that chain of trips is inherently inefficient, especially in cities not designed for it. You're often walking long distances, making multiple bus transfers, relying on transit that might not feel safe or run frequently enough outside of peak hours.
And each leg of that journey adds up.
It adds up massively. It's more expensive because you might need multiple fares, it's way more stressful, and it just eats up time, exponentially more time than that single straight commute.
Which leads to time poverty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The caregiver ends up in time poverty. There's been so much time just navigating the city, managing logistics, that they have very little time left for themselves.
Yeah.
Forget education, job training, political participation, or even just rest.
It sounds less like a personal choice and more like being trapped in a system that's designed against you.
That's the argument. And if the cities design the huge distances, the poor transit links, makes this problem worse, then the sources argue the state absolutely has an obligation to step in.
To redistribute that burden.
Yes. If the city's layout creates time poverty for caregivers, then the city's layout needs to change. You have to reduce the physical and time demands of caregiving
Oh.
by bringing services closer to where people actually live. That's the spatial fix. That's how you start to unlock that right to the city for everyone, especially caregivers.
Okay, so the problem is distance, inconvenience, time poverty. The solution has to be about space, about bringing things closer. Proximity.
Exactly. Proximity is the key word here. And this is where both the Bogota analysis and the She Rises framework really converge. They both land on spatial strategies as the core solution.
Making things closer for caregivers who often rely on walking or public transport.
Precisely. And the She Rises framework actually structures its whole approach around 4 guiding principles for how space needs to function.
These are the RISE principles, right? Let's spend some time on these.
Right. RISE stands for responsive, inclusive, safe, and equitable.
Okay, what does responsive mean in this context?
Responsive means the city designs services based on what residents actually need from the ground up,
Yeah.
not just guessing from some central office. It means talking to caregivers, understanding their daily reality, constant dialogue.
Okay, then inclusive. We talked about masculinized planning, leaving people out. Who needs to be included now?
Well, basically, anyone who isn't that default able-bodied cis male commuter. So an inclusive city is designed for everyone, people of all ages, all genders, all mobility levels.
So thinking about mothers with strollers, kids, elderly people, people using wheelchairs or walkers.
Yes, it means things like wider sidewalks, smooth pavements, ramps everywhere, benches to rest on, basic things, but often missing.
And safe. This feels really critical.
Hugely critical.
Huh.
A safe city in this framework specifically means women can move around without the constant fear or reality of sexual harassment and violence.
And that's not just about policing, it's about design.
Very much so. It's about good lighting, clear sight lines, making sure places don't feel isolated or deserted. Design can absolutely contribute to or detract from safety.
Okay, and the last one, equitable. How is that different from just equal?
Good question. Equality is giving everyone the same thing. Equity is giving people what they need to reach the same outcome. It recognizes different starting points and different needs.
So an example might be, offering job training is equal, but offering job training plus free childcare right there, that's equitable because it removes a barrier for caregivers.
Exactly. It's about providing customized resources based on diverse needs to level the playing field. And Bogota actually put these kinds of principles into practice with their care blocks, the Manzanas del Cuidado.
Okay, this is the concrete example. Tell us about these care blocks. How do they work?
So Bogota's system, SAIDI-ECU, created these care blocks. They're defined geographical areas, pretty compact, roughly 800 meters across.
Which is like a 10 or 15-minute walk.
Exactly. It directly echoes that whole 15-minute city idea that's popular globally, but here the focus is laser sharp on caregiving needs.
So what's actually in these blocks?
They do something clever. They take existing public facilities in an area like schools, libraries, health centers, community centers, and they cluster them. Then, crucially, they add new services specifically for caregivers and the people they care for, all in that same small area.
Okay, so it's co-locating things.
Yes, but the real genius, the thing that directly tackles time poverty, is simultaneity.
Simultaneity, meaning doing things at the same time.
Exactly. Think about that trip chaining nightmare. The care block flips it. A caregiver can go to the block, maybe drop off their child at a play program, or an elderly parent at a day center.
Okay.
And then in the same block at the same time, they can access services for themselves. Maybe finish their high school degree, get job training, use a laundry facility, even just have a dedicated space to rest or socialize.
Wow. So one trip serves multiple needs for multiple people.
Precisely. It turns that complex, draining journey into one efficient, productive trip that actually supports the caregiver's own well-being and autonomy, while ensuring the person they care for is also looked after nearby.
That's a fundamental redesign of how time and space work for caregivers. It treats their time as valuable.
It really does. It makes infrastructure serve social reproduction, not just economic production. But, the big idea is one thing, the details on the ground are another. And the She Rises framework gets really specific about the physical changes needed.
Right. It goes beyond just the buildings. What about the streets, the public spaces themselves?
It gets down to the nitty-gritty. For public spaces, they say, look, pavements need to be well lit, and they even talk about the right type of lighting for safety. They need to be wide enough, smooth, free of obstructions like badly placed poles or broken bits.
Simple things that make a huge difference if you're pushing a stroller or using a cane.
Absolutely. And they talk about eyes on the streets. It's the idea, from Jane Jacobs originally, that lively streets with people around, shops, cafes, vendors, people sitting outside, naturally feel safer. Women, especially, feel safer when there are other people around, when they're visible.
So avoiding dead zones, high walls that block views.
Exactly. Making the street feel more like a shared space, less like a potentially dangerous corridor. Then there's something really basic but vital. Public toilets.
Often overlooked or, frankly, unusable or unsafe.
Right. It's like a basic test of whether a city cares. The framework says toilets need to be safe, clean, functional, well-lit, especially near transit hubs and markets. And critically, they must have facilities for menstrual waste disposal.
Because without that, women's ability to just be out and about to work is limited.
It absolutely restricts their movement and participation. Finally, mobility. The focus here is on safe and reliable first and last mile connectivity.
Okay, that connection between the bus stop or train station and your actual destination.
Yes, that crucial link. A caregiver might rely on the bus, but if the walk from the bus stop home or to the care block is dark, uneven, or feels unsafe, the whole system breaks down for them.
And this is often where harassment happens.
Exactly. The framework calls out the ubiquitous problem of sexual harassment on public transport and during that first last mile walk. It's a massive barrier.
So the solution isn't just better lighting?
No, it's also about people. They recommend gender sensitization training for all transport staff, drivers, guards, everyone. And importantly, affirmative action to get more women working in the transport sector itself.
Changing the workforce to change the culture.
That's the idea. The data shows women are hugely underrepresented, like 17% on average in the countries they looked at. Having more women, drivers, staff, planners, can make the system feel safer and be more responsive to women's needs.
So redesigning for care means changing the physical streets, the services, and the people running the systems. It's comprehensive.
It has to be, to make a real difference.
Okay, these spatial solutions, the care blocks, the RISE principles, they sound really promising. But the sources are clear. Making this stick, making it last, depends totally on getting the institutions right. How did Bogota actually pull off this political side, according to the Ortiz and Franco analysis?
Right, because the ideas are great, but implementation is where things get tricky.
Yeah.
Their academic analysis looked at it through a framework connecting relational context, institutional design, and spatial strategies.
Okay.
And they found Bogota's success,
Yeah.
CCICU, wasn't accidental. It came from a kind of perfect storm, a convergence of three key things.
Oh, were they?
First, there was this foundation of long-standing feminist mobilization.
Yeah.
Decades of activists fighting to get gender equity onto the city's agenda. They'd laid the groundwork.
So the ideas were already there.
Yes. Second, you had the crucial factor of political will. Mayor Claudia Lopez made care a central part of her platform. And as the city's first woman mayor and openly lesbian, she had a deep personal commitment to it. That leadership was vital.
Okay, activism plus leadership. What was the third?
The policy opportunity created by the pandemic. Suddenly, the burden of unpaid care was so visible, so undeniable, that policymakers couldn't ignore it anymore. It created this window, this political necessity to act.
Right, the crisis forced the issue.
Exactly. And the process itself was very relational, as they put it. A lot of the energy, maybe some friction too, came from feminist activists actually moving into government roles.
From protesting outside to working inside.
Yes. And they were the ones who could translate those years of movement demands, the political struggle, into the practical language of policy memos, budgets, bureaucratic processes. They knew how to navigate the system.
That sounds like a really effective way to get things done. But the sources also warn about risks, right? This idea of political fragility.
Absolutely. This is the dose of realism.
Yeah.
The activists who went inside, they worried a lot about co-option.
Co-option, meaning the government adopts the language, but not the real change.
Precisely. The state takes the popular idea, care, but maybe waters it down, strips it of its radical, transformative political meaning, and ultimately leaves the underlying inequalities untouched. There was a real fear that care could just become an empty word if deep structural changes didn't follow the initial push.
And that fragility isn't just theoretical, is it? We saw it happen.
We did. The sources mentioned that after the 2023 election, a new mayor came in who was, let's say, less committed to gender equity. And immediately, officials who had championed the care system found themselves having to defend what we had already achieved. Funding got delayed, momentum stalled.
Wow. So even a well-designed system is vulnerable.
Incredibly vulnerable to political winds changing. Which is why Bogota's institutional design was so important. They tried to build in protections. They knew they had to break the old way of doing things, that fragmented sectoral model where each department works in its own silo.
Right. How do you get the transport department, which usually thinks about roads and buses, to suddenly start thinking about childcare and emotional labor? That seems like a huge leap.
It is. And their solution was to make care a transversal issue.
Transversal, meaning?
Cross-cutting. It wasn't just the responsibility of the Women's Secretariat, which, let's be honest, is often underfunded and lacks political clout. Instead, the policy required all city departments, transport, planning, health, education, finance, everyone, to integrate the care approach into their own work, their own plans, their own budgets.
So the transport department now has to show how its projects will actually help caregivers reduce their time poverty, not just move more cars faster.
Exactly. It forces every part of the city government to think about care. It embeds it systemically. And to lock it down even further, beyond just one mayor's term, they took some big regulatory steps.
Making it harder to undo later.
That was the goal. They included the care system in the city's main long-term planning document, the Strategic Spatial Plan, POT, and they got it formally institutionalized through a municipal council agreement. These are high-level commitments.
Writing it into the city's DNA, basically.
Trying to, yes. Giving it legal and planning protection against future political shifts. But even with all that, there's still this underlying tension. They call it the technocratic tension.
Okay, what's that?
It's the friction that happens when you take these powerful political feminist ideas like care is a right, or the need to fundamentally redistribute power and resources, and you have to translate them into the language of bureaucracy.
Into spreadsheets and performance metrics.
Exactly. Bureaucracy loves measurable targets, KPIs. And the risk is that the deep political meaning, the call for social justice, gets lost. It gets reduced to just a set of technical tasks, a service delivery checklist.
And then future governments can just manage the checklist without engaging with the original transformative goal.
That's the danger. It can strip the policy of its political force over time.
And you know, our POP research robot analysis picked up on some related critiques about the actual spatial implementation, too. Even the care blocks, brilliant as the concept is, face challenges on the ground.
Yeah, the implementation wasn't perfect. They made a strategic choice early on to rely heavily on adaptive reuse, basically repurposing existing public buildings for the care blocks.
Which makes sense for getting things done quickly, right?
Absolutely. It allowed them to get, I think, 23 blocks up and running relatively fast. But the trade-off was spatial unevenness. They couldn't always put a block in the ideal location where the need was greatest because the right kind of building wasn't available there.
So people in some of the poorer, more peripheral areas still had trouble accessing them.
That's what the analysis found. For caregivers in some informal settlements, maybe on steep hillsides, the nearest care block might still be an hour away by a complicated bus journey.
So it didn't solve the distance problem for everyone equally.
Not instantly, no. Those areas often still lack basic infrastructure like good lighting or safe paths. So even if the care block itself is great, that first last mile challenge remains, especially for the most disadvantaged residents. The facility alone couldn't erase decades of spatial inequality.
And there was another critique, too, about how care infrastructure was defined.
Yes. By focusing so heavily on the care blocks as physical facilities, as buildings providing services, the policy maybe took too narrow a view.
What did it overlook?
The critique is that it largely overlooked the critical role of housing as a fundamental infrastructure of care. So much care happens within the home.
Yeah.
And it also didn't fully integrate or perhaps value existing community-led care networks and efforts that are already happening.
So it risked presenting the state's solution as the only solution, rather than working more closely with what communities were already doing.
Potentially, yes. It reinforces a slightly static view. Care happens here, in this building, rather than seeing care as embedded in the whole fabric of daily life, including homes and neighborhoods. It's a nuance, but an important one for achieving that true co-responsibility the policy aims for. Hashtag tag outro. So wrapping things up today, we've looked at how these two different pieces, a really deep academic study of Bogotá and a practical global framework, actually arrive at a very similar, powerful conclusion.
Yeah, that making a city that truly cares isn't just about adding a few new programs.
Not at all. It requires fundamentally redesigning urban space, shifting resources, and importantly, reorienting political power. It's about acknowledging the political struggle involved in redistributing time, responsibility, and resources more equitably.
It's a big undertaking. We really want to thank the authors whose work we explored today. For Care as Urban Policy Domain, framing Bogotá's district care system, that's Catalina Ortiz and Isabel Duque Franco.
And for the She Rises framework from SafeDippin, the team included Surabhi Kandan Mehrotra, Kalpana Viswanath, Ankita Kapoor, and Riddhi Mandal. Really valuable contributions from all of them.
And remember, this deep dive, brought to you by the POP Research Robot, is produced by the Shared Use Mobility Center and the Global Network for Popular Transportation.
That's right. And the Shared Use Mobility Center, or SUMC, is a nonprofit working in the public interest. Their mission is to connect and equip change leaders who are advancing people-centered shared mobility systems that combat climate change, promote equity, and strengthen communities.
And SUMC's vision, it's that all people have access to joyful, dignified, fair, safe, reliable, and affordable transportation options, even if they don't own a car.
So as we finish up, we want to leave you with a question to chew on, something that builds on what we've discussed.
Okay, here it is. If getting these care policies institutionalized often requires political leaders to adopt feminist language and ideas, at least initially.
But the process of turning those ideas into bureaucratic reality, into metrics and targets, risks watering them down and stripping away their political force.
Then what's the best strategy? For activists, for engaged citizens like you, how do you sustain that truly transformative political agenda for care through multiple elections and changes in government? How do you keep the meaning alive?
Something to think about. Keep learning, keep asking questions.
And join us next time for another deep dive from the POP Research Robot.